We just covered the pen tool. Now we're going to go into the other tools that Photoshop has that are used less often. And what I mean by other tools is over here in the toolbar, we notice that there's other tools hiding that we didn't cover. Let's talk briefly about them, even though we may not use all of them. With this example file that we've already been playing with, let's start from the top. So the move tool, as you know, is anything that you want to move, like we mentioned. And that we already covered. I don't use this artboard tool. It's not really necessary either. This rectangle marquee tool we covered generally, but that essentially is the option or the ability to select something, copy it, or just having a temporary confined border. Let me just show you what I mean. Let's pretend I have a new layer. And if I have, say, this selection here, anything that I do in this layer with this selection active will not affect anything else outside of it. So if I take my brush, and if I start brushing, and then hit Command D for deselect or Control D, you'll see that the brush strokes didn't go outside that border. Now the reason why I don't do it this way so much is because I'd rather have a mask that has that selection made. So if I enable a selection and then click on the mask icon, it puts that selection to a mask. Then anything I do here can be edited much more easily. So if I want to go to the eraser tool, and I'll change my flow, and then erase it, and then decide I want to brush it again, I can quickly go back and do it. I don't have to make a selection all over again because the mask is there. If I want to temporarily remove the mask, hit Shift, and simply deactivate the thumbnail. But don't delete it in case you want to use it again. The other useful thing for selections is I can take a rectangle marquee tool, highlight a copy of the part of the background, hit Command or Control C, and hit Command or Control V, and it takes that same selection and makes a copy of it, but just that part of the layer. The difference is if you try to hit Command C without the selection and Command V, it won't actually paste anything by itself. You have to make a selection first and then copy it and then paste it. So for instance, if I'm going to duplicate this layer, you did Command J, which is duplicate, or layer, duplicate layer. Now the selection tool also has elliptical marquee, which is if you want a circle or any kind of curvature shape, or you can make it with a pen tool, or you can select a single row of pixels, which I don't know why you'd specifically do. There's also this free transform tools like this lasso tool. So if I start clicking and going over my image, it makes a freeform selection. This is useful in case you decide that you want to quickly select an area, maybe of his hair. Command C, Command V, the move tool, that could Command T, which is the transform tool, like we mentioned earlier. And when the transform tool is active, I can right click, rotate 90 degrees or flip horizontally, and hit enter. I can drop the opacity, move it again, make sure it's lined up, bring it back to 100, and then maybe add a little bit of a mask, and start brushing in things. So you're quickly able to do many things with selecting and transforming and masking. Okay, there we go, beautiful. So what else can we do here? Aside from that, there's also this quick select tool with magic wand. The magic wand just gives you a general selection of the area. I don't use it very much because it doesn't do the job that I usually need it to. But it's good in a pinch if you quickly want to make a general outline of something. And the magic wand tool itself has different tolerance. So instead of, say, having something like this, you can say a tolerance of 100. And then what it does, it selects the area that you want and then some, like neighboring areas. Or you can make it really refined. And it only selects a specific color. So I'll get out of there. The quick selection tool is like a selection brush. So as you can see, it's actually selecting as I'm brushing, just so it knows when to stop and when not to. It's a more advanced version of the magic wand tool. So I'll deselect. There's also the polygonal lasso tool. So it makes like a temporary pen path without the ability to make curves. And then once you connect it, it makes a selection. And then you can do whatever you want with it. So it's like the baby pen tool. And this magnetic lasso tool allows you to move your cursor without clicking on anything, and it draws these little points, like the pen points, except when you connect them, it makes a selection. The next useful tool is the eyedropper tool. This allows you to select the color that you want, like we talked about in our palettes. Obviously, we have our brush. The pencil is not used very much at all. It's something that just creates a hard edge. So it's not something that's really useful because the brush tool pretty much accomplishes everything that you need with the pencil anyway. We have the clone brush that you know already. The history brush that we don't really use so much. We have the eraser tool, like we mentioned throughout this tutorial, where if you have something that you want to erase, you can quickly erase it from the layer itself. So if I have something painted on a blank layer, I don't want to make a mask. It's like a temporary mask. So I can erase that content if I'm pretty sure that I want it gone and I don't need a mask. My first step is always using a mask before anything else. But in case that you don't want to use a mask, you can use an eraser to quickly do it. The gradient itself is another tool. It allows you to select points that you want to use, like we talked about with gradient maps. And the right side's black, the left side's white. When I hit OK, I can select a new layer and click from one point to the other, and it makes a gradient for you based on the angle that you worked on. Or you can combine it with a mask. So say I have a curve and I'm deepening it. I can click on the mask, and because it's black and white, you can simply click and drag, and when you do, you can see that the mask itself has black on the top and white at the bottom, which indicates that this curve is only affecting the bottom part of the image. The next part is the blur tool. I actually don't use the blur tool on the image itself because I have Gaussian blur and masks. But the good part of the blur tool is, say that, again, I have something that we're going to do with an adjustment. And I am going to quickly take my brush, I'll use a hard edge. I'll mask the edge of his shirt a little bit. Let's pretend I want this edge to be softened. Well, with the mask itself, it's quite hard. And I can take the blur tool, making sure that the mask is selected and not the layer. And when I start blurring, you can see that the edge becomes softer. And so it softens the selection. Sharpening does the opposite. This smudge tool, it pushes and pulls pixels. I can also combine that with a mask and move the contents of the mask. Because I have a mask selected, it's actually moving the mask itself. However, the end result is that the curve is only applied to the area outside the mask. So it looks really cool when you're doing it. It makes it much easier to move a mask if it's not exactly perfect. Next, we have our dodge and burn tools. I don't use these because these make images lighter or darker, or certain areas lighter or darker, and the sponge tool desaturates or saturates parts of an image. Why do we not use that? Well, simply because we have other tools to use that we combine with masks to undo something. With these dodge and burn tools, we're only able to affect the actual background layer itself. So it's destructive. We can't edit this in the future. So I'll keep that as a tool that I would recommend not using so much. You can use this on a mask itself. Maybe there's certain parts of a mask that are gray and you want to darken it so it fills it in completely. You can quickly sweep across the image with the burn tool and darken it up. And then of course we have our pen tool. The freeform pen tool is another part of the pen tool. However, it just creates a general outline and then adds the points later, which gives you a lot more work to do anyway. So I don't use it either. These are all the same parts of the pen tool that we talked about with our command shortcuts. We also have a text tool. The text tool is just that. You can click on part of the image and then start typing. You can change the color of the wording to black and then type accordingly. So if I exit it and then go back to the tool and sample a color, it changes colors. Or I can highlight some of the letters and then change colors for those letters. A cool part about the text tool is the ability to combine them with different blending modes. For example, let's say I start typing here. I'll type the words proof. It's really tiny, so I will go up to my point size and start increasing. But as you notice, it's not increasing just yet. The reason for that is because it's simply active as I was writing. I can hit check, and then now when I start adjusting this, it changes the size of the text. So you first have to complete writing. Instead of hitting enter, you hit the checkbox. And then now when you adjust the text size, it changes along with the color. So let's say we want to blend this text with the image itself because this is a proof and we don't want it to be printed. And we don't want it to be stolen, for instance. We can use the move tool with the text layer active to move the location. You can also hit Command T for transforming. So all the functions that you know of are there. And I undid that so you can go back to the same horizontal line that you were working with. I'll hit Command T, Option Shift or Alt Shift, and bring it even higher or bigger in case you don't want to use the size function. And then I can change either the opacity Or if I want to get fancy, I can change it to screen. So you can see how it lightens up the image with the same color and the same shape of our text. Or I can darken it from what we know from our blending modes to overlay. Or soft light if I don't want a harsher color. And vivid light if I want a harder color. I can double click, or I should say I can go back into the move tool, move the location if I need to, click on the text tool and change the color of the text. So it gives me a really cool and fun way of experimenting with blending modes with text as well. This is a good way of also adding text to editorials. Maybe you're working on a series of images that you want to add text and credits over. Or maybe even a title slide. This could even work if you're doing logos on different colored backdrops. If I want to delete it, I just hit delete. Then we have this shape option, which are different shapes. You can use them to make paths, like we talked about, and it makes a path for you. Then you'd simply go to your pen tool and use your commands to modify them. Or you can quickly just make a shape. So you can create solid objects. So I'll click on pixels and then just quickly drag, and it makes a solid block of whatever color that is in your foreground color. And it also has different shapes. So it has polygonal shapes. There's even the line tool. With the line tool, I can click on pixels again, and it'll create a solid line that I can change the width of. So I'll change the weight to say 30 pixels, and as I drag it across and let go, it creates a line. That's all that really does. Then again, the rotate tool, you just hit escape. If you want to go back to normal, the default command is R. And then you have your magnifying glass, which we talked about with the Z command, or the Z key. Another quick way of doing selections is if you click on this mask button here, it'll act like something has happened even though nothing is showing. The only way you know is this is being highlighted. So it's basically asking us to do something even though we don't know what it's wanting us to do. And that's fairly simple. We'll take our black brush and then we'll start painting. Except this time it's not painting black, it's painting red. The reason why it's painting red is it's giving us an opportunity to make a selection with a paintbrush. So let's say I do a general selection of our subject. Now, once I'm done doing a selection, it also keeps account for opacity. So say the edges of our selection soft, it's going to keep that in mind when it makes a selection. When I'm done, I'll just click on that button again, and it makes a cutout of our subject. Now keep in mind, although this is showing a straight line as if it's a cutout, it has the opacities built in there. I'll show you. So I'll add another adjustment layer. Let's say hue saturation, and I desaturate. You can see the edges of our selection is exactly the same like our brush. And although that line looked solid, it kept that opacity in mind. So that wraps up our section on other tools in Photoshop. Now let's go on to the color range feature.